So Saima Prabhu, General Manager at Vijayanagar. I run the most coolest and the fun-loving group, and also the fastest-growing group called the QA practice, right? We have a huge head office back in Minneapolis, and that's why this 40 degrees looks and appears really warm and toasty for me. Just saying, it didn't take a lot to get me here. So we have a huge head office for QA back in Minneapolis. We have folks all over the regions, as well as a big QA branch back in Manila, too. A little about me. I have a very diverse background, been in the IT industry for nearly 20 years. Wow, it's good to test stuff out. So basically, I can just move in a little 1 by 1 foot on one leg. I get it. I get what I have to do now. So a little about me. I've been there in the industry for 20 years. I know I look much younger. Thank you for the compliment. But been there for 20 years, and like it or not, I've moved around a lot, right from manufacturing, did a little bit of sales. I wasn't as good as you, Nikki. I moved on to marketing. Development. I did a lot of development, and then I fell in love with QA, and I'm still in QA. People don't understand why I fell in love with QA, and that's okay. Once you're in love with something, you're in love with something. And I've enjoyed my ride so far, and we've done some great things in the QA field. We like to take pride to say that we're the thought leaders, along with a lot of other thought leaders in the industry for QA. And today I would like to take this opportunity to share some of my knowledge and some of the knowledge I've learned from other people over the years. And I hope this is a very, very helpful presentation for you all, because I really do value that time. And I hope this is fruitful. Before I jump into the topic in more, I would like to know a little bit about my audience. So I'm going to ask quick questions. How many project managers do we have here?
I'm a program manager, so you can call me.
Yeah, same.
Cool. Program managers. Cool. Developers. I can see why.
They're all online. They're working.
They're all online, huh? So the developers are all online. Okay, we'll limit the jokes on them. How about BAs, product owners, QA, testers? Oh yes, we are with the coolest people out here, and the other folks. And anybody from the television industry, CNN, Fox 9, any paparazzi here? You know, we're just so popular testers. You never know. You never know when people want to steal a secret sauce, and you just got to be careful of the media these days. Again, back to a very, very exciting topic. So today, what we're going to be speaking is quality with speed and the must-dos for all test organization. Now, I think this topic, most of you are testers here and passionate about this field, and we could be talking about days and days about this topic. We don't have that much time, so I'll try to condense it to what I see and where we are in the industry. And feel free to ask questions at any given time. I'd love them. Or if you want to wait till the end of the presentation, that's fine too. So one of the things that in my consulting career, for QA at least, that we've noticed is we work in a lot of different software life cycles, right? We've done the waterfall, we've done the mixed waterfall, we've done the kind of waterfall, and then we've done kind of waterfall. This also has a cool name called sashimi, in case you didn't know. And then I've also worked a lot on spiral. I love spiral for a reason. And then there was RAD, RUP, and there's the whole mashup of iterative, and now Agile, right? So different life cycles, but if you see the wave in the last 6 to 8 years, right? All the companies have been moving towards Agile. And some of them aggressively, and some, when you look at the ones that have FDA regulations and a lot of compliances, they're moving a little bit more slowly towards it and a little less open to accept Agile. Agile is there, and it's there to stay. It's worked for a lot of companies. But what has also happened is, even though a lot of the development teams have moved quickly into Agile, a lot of the QA teams haven't. Now, for those teams, so if y'all are sitting here and y'all are at the maturity level that you made it, and it's great, and it's awesome, so cool for you guys. It's really awesome. Hide your people and hide your technology, because I'll steal them. Because there are very few out there, right? Very few out there. There are a lot that are in the middle phase, right? Where they aren't getting everything they want out of it, but they're really good, successful testing teams. And then we have some teams that are still struggling. And I'm hoping today's presentation can help, regardless of where you are in the maturity level. And we can all learn something together, right? So Magenic, as a consulting company, has worked a lot on Agile projects. They do a lot of research and studies over and over again to see that you're current with the market, to know that you're doing the right things, what's the wave in the industry, and stuff like that. So one of the studies that Magenic had done was with Forrester to see the different demographics and different verticals and see how the companies are doing with Agile today, right? So these are people that have already gone Agile. So if you look at the metrics, 74% wanted to go into Agile and went into Agile expecting improved quality, right? Going to be releasing like this, right? And we are going to have amazing quality because we work so close together, and what we're going to deliver is actually what people want to see. You're not going to wait for 2 years, right? And then discover you built something you didn't have to, right? So 74% wanted improved quality, just technical quality. But the results show that actually it's only 30%. 30% that have achieved improved quality. Well, they did get predictable releases. So obviously, Agile does something right, right? You get releases on time. You're getting releases on time, just not with the high improved quality, right? So now there's a lot of stories, right? Depending if it's a tester, the tester is going to be like, well, if they check in whatever they want to check in, it doesn't work, right? It's Agile, you're going to go fast, you're not even seeing what you're checking in. Well, let's not look at the perspective of only a tester today, right? Let's look at what we get up to every day. What we get up to every day is what people think we do. Do people in the industry that are non-testers think that we are successful in testing Agile? And when we look at those numbers, you can see that a lot of people think we struggle. And these are people that have implemented Agile, right? So basically what the groups are saying, whether it might be product owners, CIOs, different. There's some testers sprinkled in this too. But they're saying 52% really want to reduce the wait time on testing. How often have we heard jokes about us saying, oh yeah, it takes us 3 days to build it, and then they want 3 months to test it, right? 52% feel we should go faster, right? The remaining 39 agree about it, but they're not so aggressive about what they say. Well, the great part is not only do they want us to finish testing faster, but, oh boy, I also want increased coverage. Well, let's put it this way. I want you to test more, but I really can't wait and give you that much time to test it, right? This is a classic example happening. Now, a lot of you, if you're into the maturity of sprints, where you're in sprint and you're working on the right capacity, velocity, and you can predict your velocity like this. And now, boy, this is my capacity, this is how I'm going to test, this is getting done. Your life is so easy, right? The whole developer versus QA, hey, you gave me a build today, and now in 2 days, I've got to test what you built for 3 weeks. that doesn't happen. Because when you're at that maturity level of a sprint where you are delivering every day, testing every day, giving back the defect every day, your defects go in the backlog every single day, right? When you're in sprint, oh boy, your life is so much easier. So sweet, because there's no developer, no tester. You're just a team. That's all they see. A team that is high velocity, accurate capacity, happy people, delivering good code. Doesn't matter if you're a BA, doesn't matter if you're QA, doesn't matter if you're dev, right? But if that's not happening, then obviously something needs to be done. Well, so you had people say, I wanted more testing, and I wanted it in less time, but a lot of the same folks say that 44% of them agreed that they give the testers the application when it is done building. I don't know how agile you are then, right? So this the struggle in the industry where I think a lot of organizations that are struggling really don't know how to fit the test organization in this sprint, right? And maybe we can help them. That's my thing. We've had a lot of successful projects, and over the years, I keep doing retrospectives. What worked? What worked for a client? What didn't work for a client? What's their culture? What's their mindset? How can we make our lives easier as a group? Doesn't matter if you're a tester or you're a dev. How do you just make your life easier? And for that, today I'm going to share some of our secret sauce. Of course, there's information we have taken from Forrester when they did the study of what makes sense, but it's not exactly entirely that, because then there's a lot of how do we do it in practice, in day-to-day life, right? So some of it is very customized to how we do things, but I hope this is helpful. So when we look at the industry, some of the common complaints that we get about as testers, right, is lack of technical testing. A lot of the folks feel that you are not fast enough because you're not very technical, right? Some of them feel that you really just take too much time to test. I really can't afford to delay the product that much, especially when we start thinking about mobile and IoT and digital transformation. The thing is, you are going to release so often. The fact is, you will not get that time to test. So what do we do, right? So we have to keep current to it. So some of it makes sense of what people see about us. Some of it doesn't. But a lot of it is how do you give valuable information back? How do you test frequently, early, and how do you become technical testers? And the fact that some people have just recognized that the test group is struggling in the organization, right? So these are some of the pain points that they see. Now, when I say I'm sharing my secret sauce, I'm really sharing it, right? So there's so many things you can do, but Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So you want to take baby steps, but a few things that you should look at is a TCOE or a QAO that works. And we'll get to what do I mean by it works, right? Shift left, shift right, automation, testing tools, and then I call connect the dots, right? Any questions before we jump into the first piece? Wow, I think you're just amazed with my intelligence. There's absolutely no questions happening here. But
So I'm sorry, I have what could potentially be a really stupid question.
No, there's nothing.
So the PMO reports. Oh, I'm sorry. Now I can be like broadcast stupid question, right? So are you speaking of UAT? You're not speaking of unit testing, right? So during developing, you test that initial code. You're speaking of the UAT at the end, the full test cycle, correct?
So I'm talking about the functional testing, then the integration testing, then the system testing, and then finally, yes, the CAT and the UAT.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So right from the phase between the unit test, which I expect developers to write, to the phase of UAT, everything that happens in the middle is what we're going to discuss. And that's actually a really good question. No, it is. It is. So when we look at TCOEs and QAO, the first thing I will beg all of you to do is first accept that not every TCOE and QAO is working for you, right? The biggest problem we testers have, or let's say the test organization has, is that we spent millions over the last 5 years to build this TCOE, so this is how it's going to be. Well, times change. Systems don't last more than 5 years today. How is your TCOE going to last if you built that 3 years back, 10 years back? It's not valid anymore. So the first thing I would encourage everybody is be vocal to your managers, right? Be vocal to your managers. Look at the TCOE and QAO if you have one. If you don't, there's the next topic that we go to. But if you have one, look at it. Do a retrospective. Is it really working? Some of the signs I can give, even as an outsider, to your organization to say your TCOE is not working is, one, if you have to jump through hoops and hoops to get anything done in testing, you got a problem right there, right? People just talk during the coffee machine, but you got a problem. Your TCOE is not working. If you're a new tester in an organization or a new test director or a manager in the organization and you're trying to figure out what's this TCOE, and you get handed this 200 or maybe 400-page document, and that's all people can tell you about TCOE, obviously it's not working. So there are a lot of signals that you can get, a lot of signs that tell you that, you know, it was good when it was good, but times have changed and your TCOE has changed. Now, if you're in a position of power where you can create a TCOE, then look at it with a new mind frame. Look at it and make something that works, right? So when we go into a must-do, I always say, you should have a working QAO or a TCOE. Now, if you're a really, really tiny company where you have developers and you have testers and you're not larger than an entire group of 20 people, well, you're at the emerging parts of creating a TCOE. And that time, it's okay if you just focused on that one product that you'll build. That's okay. But have a good TCOE for that. But if you're a huge company, right, let's say you span all over the world, multinational, and you have multiple QA groups, you know, that's the time when the TCOEs are not working. It's really not working. And so you've got to think about it as a TCOE at a program level versus a project level. A lot of TCOEs were built saying, hey, you're going to use QTP, and you're going to use this, and you're going to use that. And all the testers are in shared services kind of groups. The problem is the new project coming up, QTP can't work on it. Well, you don't get permission to do automation. That's kind of crazy, right? That's when you know that TCOEs are not working for you. When they actually create more trouble for you, you've got to go to the grassroots and clean that up. The same way, I'd say, if you have a TCOE, you should have reusable frameworks. Something light, not a giant. You don't want to maintain giant frameworks, right? Something light, something that can work on multiple technologies. Make sure you have a lot of accelerators, right? So those could be libraries, things that different groups can borrow from you. Because remember, your code integrates, right? A lot of projects integrate with each other. The amazing part is a lot of testing teams go and automate by themselves, right? You're spending 2x, whereas that x is really difficult to get in the first place, right? So that's why you should make sure that if you're building something reusable, scream through the rooftops. Make sure the other QA managers know what your team is building and see if you can share it with other people. The other thing that I truly believe in, and this is the change, right, is TCOE is not just a group. In my mind, a TCOE is a mindset. It's a mindset of bright, intelligent, passionate test engineers, testers in this field. Somebody that gets up every day, not only to test an application, but to say, hey, what is it that I'm learning that's new today, right? Did I check what different tool sets are there in the market? It's very similar to a development job. If you look at a lot of developers, you'd see them at like 2 a.m. getting all excited about a tool in the market or some way of writing things. It's very similar in QA these days, you know? So when you think of TCOE, you're not only thinking best practices, you're thinking about people that bring this wealth of knowledge, of wanting to share something new, something exciting. You could do it as lunch and learns, or you can also do it as hands-on session where you try different tools. My whole thing is that there's so many open source tools. If your company allows you to do that, you should look into it. If your company doesn't, there are other ways to do that too. But it's a mindset. It's a mindset of learning, training, and learning, right? So a lot to digest, but that's the way I look at how a TCOE should be structured. Now, if you have that, please don't forget your PMO. It's really important because no Agile project can be successful without a great partnership between everybody on the team. So if you have processes, you have frameworks, you have a structure, please share it with the PMO and other folks so that it can be integrated. Otherwise, you're different silos, right? You're a silo that's not talking to each other. And I think a lot of times, testers do such an awesome job, but since the PMO doesn't know what they're doing, they don't know. It's a perception sometimes. So a lot of times, you've got to make sure you not only sell what you're doing, you keep selling your ideas, your capabilities. So they look at you as forward thinking and a thought leader in the market way. So a lot of this goes together to make a working TCOE. Does anybody have questions on TCOEs that work, don't work?
What is a TCOE?
Brilliant question. Testing Center of Excellence, and QAO is the quality office, the QA office.
Quick question. So how does a TCOE differ in an agile setup versus a traditional waterfall setup? And does it need to take into account more usage of automation tools and some of the other tools that would align with the agility and the velocity that you would get in an
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why the question for those that are on the call listening was, is there a difference in the TCOE between folks that were more in a waterfall fashion rather than now with everybody going agile? Absolutely. And that's why the first way I started was you got to admit and accept if your TCOE doesn't work for you, right? Because times have changed. The way people are developing has changed. So why is the way you're testing not changed, right? I think a lot of the concepts are the same. It's how you use them, when you use them, and why you use them, right? That's how I look at it. I used to be in manufacturing, and in manufacturing, quality control is a huge aspect. And I used to be in diamond manufacturing, so it used to be a bigger aspect because you devalue something by making mistakes. The principles of how you test things and all don't change. What tools, techniques, and mindset you're using is really what changes. And if your TCOE cannot help you as a tester jumping into a company, then obviously something's missing, right? Very good question.
Are you referring to a TCOE at an organizational level, or like business unit level, or are you talking about multiple centers of excellence depending upon how you operate?
Brilliant question. So if it's a smaller company, there will be one centralized TCOE. But if it's a huge company, everywhere, I've seen them have multiple. And in those cases, multiple helps because the technology stack and all the things they're using is so diverse that having one governing it is really difficult. And that's the other thing that has to be taken into account, right? If an organization has certain projects that go more in the waterfall with slight iterations, the way TCOE blends for them is so different compared to somebody that's working on IoT or mobile, or somebody that's going deploying every week, right? The concepts are drastically different. The theory of what is integration testing, what is system testing, none of that changes. But how you do, when you do, and what you're using, and your staff, right? The ability of your staff drastically changes. Very good. Anything else before we jump? Yes?
Is there a certain department size or sales value or budget value that would say if you were this big, you would need an organizational level TCOE, as he mentioned, versus maybe an informal, this is another hat people wear, this is a part-time role?
So the way I look at it, even if you are the smallest possible group, right, and that's the only QA group the company has, for me, TCOE is such a mindset that even when you're informal, you're creating your own TCOE because you're waking up every morning thinking, how can I just do the same job I've been doing for years in a more efficient way, more exciting, you know? So it can be started informally. It doesn't need to have a formal TCOE name, right? But it's that culture. It's a culture of continuous learning and sharing. And sometimes some companies don't have TCOEs. Maybe they're not going to go there. But then please engage yourself with your community, right? Because there are a lot of companies like today that meet together and try to talk about new things. Like we have what we call TC Tag in Minneapolis, where consulting companies are not allowed to come in and talk about themselves, but it's all about technical folks talking only about automation. So every month, somebody presents automation, they dive into the code, everybody can have hands-on touch and feel. So those are the things. If your company is not ready, please join other groups where a lot of folks want to come together and do it. Yeah. So, but a mindset. I think the whole problem is getting into that mindset for a lot of people. Because as it is, a lot of the tester lives are dedicated in a way that they get only 2 hours to test something that they should have got 36 in the first place. So when you are living that life, how do you take time to go learn new things, right? And that's why you've got to figure how to blend that in. And it should be at a company level where you encourage your people to be able to learn more and be part, just like developers get that opportunity, the testers have. Now, really good questions. So the next thing that we encourage everybody is what I call the shift left and the shift right, right? So it's still amazing how many companies don't do it. When we say shift left, go really early on the process. Don't wait for something to be built to be able to put the tester on. Please never do that. Have them early on because most of you are testers here, or at least with the testing group, and you know the value you bring to the table, right? By being on, you catch so many defects early on in requirements that it's amazing. So please encourage your PMO, your project sponsor, your product owner to bring you early on. Other than requirements, the other area we have found tremendous value is you start the automation architect the same time as the dev architect because it's building of system. You need to have a strategy, and I'm jumping into another slide, but you need to have a strategy from the very beginning of what's going to be reusable, how are you going to do it, what's the benefit for it, right? So shift left, that's the whole concept, you know. But decide with your group whether you're going to be part of a sprint, in sprint testing, or are you going to lag a sprint, right? Either way is fine. If a lagged sprint works for your company, please do that. In sprint works. It's a little bit more difficult. Higher maturity levels are required because you don't want the dev team giving you code just 2 days before the end of the sprint because then obviously in sprint is not working. It's only working for them, not for you. And that's when you have to insist to go lag the sprint. But you got to get the buy-in that you are part of everything. Part of making the backlogs, part of estimates, part of making sure where the defects go, whose bucket it's sitting at, all those estimations. It can't be an afterthought. So you got to push for it. You know, you feel the pain, you got to push for it. You got to push and make sure you're at the very beginning. I use the word here, QACI. It's not an industry term, it's my own term. We use it quite a bit. What it is QA continuous integration. So try to be part of the continuous integration, DevOps, as most of you would have heard. Make sure that by the time you get the build, you have your tests that are already running to say whether this is a deployable product in the QA environment or not. So please, and that's why you need the architect at the very beginning to see, are you using Visual Studio? Are you using Jenkins? Are you using Docker? What are you going to use? You won't believe this, but we have been at places where development doesn't have continuous integration implemented, but QA has been able to. So we don't do the entire release to production, but you can release to your own environment and show that it's proven. Have deploy every day, and run your scripts every day as per the deployment. Your scripts fail, the deployment gets pushed back, and you have a rollback. You could do that. That's a tester's thing. Shift left. It saves your manual testers time when they come in. They know that I'm not going to touch this build. It's already been rejected. In the same way, analyze what's, when we say shift right, please be there with, support your CAT, that is client acceptance testing or UAT, support them throughout the process. I just love the companies where they are trying to make sure that UAT gets to see the product after the end of every sprint or every 2 sprints or 3 sprints, depending on the time available, they do that. But a lot of times it should be the QA lead or the QA manager helping UAT figure this out, right? How do you help them know what's coming in? How do you help them know what's to be tested, what's not to be tested, so that you'll not double the thing and doing the same test? Makes no sense, right? And then please don't stop. If you've already deployed in the production, please don't stop saying, well, it's gone. Please request, if you can, to analyze the data that comes back from production. Because whatever data comes back from production, whether you believe it or not, that's your best vehicle to explain to upper management on how you did. Let's say, when I mean escapes is the defects that went into production, right? Let's say you had very few defects in production. You can take that back to your management and say, hey, because of the test capacity you provided us, the velocity at which we are running, and because of the accelerators we have, the test group did such a phenomenal job that you had 30 last month, and guess what? You supported us, and we have only 5 this month, right? Please, testers forget to do this. Don't forget to do that. At the same time, it could happen that there's a lot of defects gone in production, and guess who gets the blame for it? A lot of the time, the test organization gets told that, hey, you did not test everything. Well, please use that metrics to justify why you need more capacity and stuff like that. So, and then the same retrospective can go back to your TCOE, and that can be put as processes in place. So that's where we look at shift left and shift right. Make sure your testing group is there throughout the duration. It doesn't have to be the entire group, but you need to have a presence, somebody that can advocate.
Does regression testing come into that as well?
Definitely. Definitely. Regression is part of it. Yes.
Where does the non-functional testing sit in this life cycle? Is it left or right?
I think, brilliant question. I'm very opinionated about it. I let the clients do what they want to in the end. But in my mind, the non-functional testing has to happen every sprint. So when we talk about certain non-functional testing, one of it, I would say, is performance testing, right? We would call that non-functional. Why wouldn't we do it every sprint? I know we might not have an environment like staging to do like a load test, but you can say with so many simulated users, the current code is giving you this performance. Because what happens is if, let's say you wait for 6 sprints, right? And then you say, I'm going to do performance testing today and I'm ready for it. What's going to happen is 90% of the time you'll find that it is slower than you want it to, which means that they're going to refactor it. The moment they refactor it, they touch the code. Now you have to do the entire functional testing and regression all over again. So the way we look at it is please do your non-functional test in the sprint. Now sometimes there might not be a lot of things ready to test, right? But then they're frameworks. So let's say there are certain database schemas that are ready. Or let's say they have a batch system that they're putting in place. Different kind of things, right? And that's when the QA architect, automation architect will work with the systems architect and say, I think these areas could be a potential bottleneck, and then figure out which sprint you can start testing. So as soon as they come in, you can start testing. But it has to be a continual process. Brilliant question. But I do believe, impartial, I think it has to be done right away. Otherwise, the whole refactoring is just crazy. It's just more work for the testers on the same, and you have the same capacity. Your capacity hasn't changed, but now the amount you have to test has changed. So it just helps if you get ahead of it and get those defects plugged in beforehand. Very good question. Anybody else for any of the shift left and shift right? I ramble a lot, so gotta make sure. When I get excited, it's like, oh boy, there's a trapped audience here. I may as well make use of it, right? So the next one, which is everybody's favorite, right? And I know one slide doesn't do justice for any of the topics I had today here, but automate early and often, right? So the first one that I'd already jumped into, bring in your automation architects. And when I say automation architects, believe me, we might interview 50 people and get one candidate, right? Automation architect is very much, the thought process is like a Dev architect. You're thinking about, does this framework work? Is it scalable? You might not think so much about performance, but someday all your tests have to run in some time window. You want to think about maintenance even before you start building it. You want to think about cost. The bigger thing is you want to think, how are you managing source control? I just heard today that there have been automation engineers where the scripts work on their machine. Well, I thought that was a joke we used for developers, saying, well, if it works on your machine, put it on the cloud over there, right? But I've heard that automation engineers do the same thing. Wow, then that's absolutely wrong, right? Because then your tests have no value for anybody else. So they should be the whole. How do you branch? How do you merge? How do you check in new changes to your framework? That's what an architect should do. If they're not doing that, and if they're just trying to track your work progress, they're really not true architects. They really should be having their hands dirty with code and be talking like development architects you have been seeing. And that is something I think every company, before they start automation, should start looking into those things. The next thing that's really important is staff test engineers. And when I mean automation, the record and play really doesn't work. We all know this, right? And the maintenance cost is so high. You're going to be sitting on 3,000 test cases, which are not maintainable. People come and go, and then the next person is like, I don't even know where to touch this. Or your UI is changing so much that even if you did a great job, your tests are not working. So the whole thing is, when we do it, we do page object models, things like that, where people are actually writing C# and Java. And I would encourage you that please learn a tool set. Tools are there to make your life easier, but it doesn't do everything. There is some maintenance cost for those tools. And so if you have really, really strong coding skills, it's going to help you with your scripts. It really is. So that's how I look at it. You've got to staff engineers. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody in your team needs to be able to do C# and Java, right? Not everybody. You're a manager in your group. You know how to divide the work, and you know which work is going where. But the automation team should run like a development engine, which is producing and delivering work, right? You got to hold them accountable. You got to hold them accountable for giving you a product which is code for automation. And it should work. And it should be in such a way that you know what's getting released, when it's getting released. So think about it. They're no different than a development group. You've got to be able to get them into that whole velocity. Hey, what are you giving me? When are you giving me? These are my features. How much help am I going to get from you, right? So you got to get those same discipline and standards for your automation engineers. And when I say test engineers, they could be checking database and doing a lot of test data management, automation of that for you, or they could be performance and load testers. But there has to be a way they check in code. They have to be able to code to be able to do all that, right? I can't keep saying how much CI is important. DevOps is important for every company, but QA is no different. When you talk Agile, QA is part of the team. So how can your code not be part of it, right? And so that's how you got to make sure that you can merge your code in, what are the standards, stuff like that. Which also means peer reviews, code reviews, that is part of a good testing team, that you should be able to code review each other. Automate at different layers, right? Web services. How many of you have different layers automated? Awesome. Yeah. And it's a must, right? The way the Agile processes, there will be so much that comes in at different layers. You don't get a UI to test for like maybe sprint 8, maybe you get something. You cannot be dependent on that, right? So please automate at different levels. It's easy to automate. The skill sets are easy. There are a lot of tools there. You can write your own custom code to automate at different layers too. And the beauty is that if you automate at this layer, you can always put it part of your CI. And then when you generate your deployments, you'll know if something is broken at those layers. Why would your team spend any time doing UI work if you know that there's a problem at the layers? You can see your code and then you know what? The baseline is broken. Sometimes the projects could be so complicated, right? That let's say 6 QA groups are touching it. At least if you have automation at the layers, you can say, hey, it's going to affect everybody. This code is not usable for at least 3 groups, right? People that do mobile, they're still touching different layers. Where do they get all their data and all that? You get it at the layers. So even if you're doing mobile, at least if you have your automation ready, you can go to the next layer of automation. So the whole thing I would say is, it's cool to look at UI getting automated and seeing somebody do all that stuff. I know it does look cooler, right? But the maintenance cost, you got to keep that in mind. That as you do that, you want to see where the maintenance cost is. Are you really getting the ROI out of it? And that's why I would say don't automate just because you can. I know you need the skill sets, but don't experiment it on your project. It's good to have certain tool sets, but not everything should be automated. I see people trying to compare images and automation, and I'm like, oh my God, first of all, testing gets this tiny budget, right? It's like, really, where is it? I can't even see my budget, right? You get that tiny budget, and then you have this excited person, oh, I'm going to do all the screen compares for you. And I'm like, oh my God, you're going to spend all your money on automation that's not even going to be helpful for you. So that is something that you have to look at your maturity level of where are you automating and things like that. There's a lot of open source in the market. If your company allows you to do it, not every company can, especially if you have some audit constraints and things like that, you can't use. But you should ask the question. You don't ask the question, you don't know. Because there's so many open source tools, you can do network throttling, you can do so many different things that as a manual tester, it's so difficult to do. And you're going to make your life easier and give yourself some time back too, right? And then again, the whole focus goes back to whatever you do, in the end as automation, your productivity is like a development engine. your thought process is of QA, you know? So it's like a QA mind with development abilities. You have to think as a QA person because we are gifted. We know where things are going to break. We know what the bottlenecks are, right? So you're gifted that you have that ability. Now you just need the skill sets to be able to code, right? And then you also want to make sure that when you automate, there is some ROI. Because you want to go back to the well for more, and you want to be able to justify why you're taking that money, and how are you benefiting, and how's the business benefiting. So that is a must-do. Please start thinking about automation at different layers. It will make your life definitely easier. Questions? Okay. The next must-do is testing tools. A lot of you are lucky enough to have good testing tool sets, right? And a lot of you are not. And I still see clients struggle. They use Excel, they don't have the latest testing tools. But sometimes you've got to make sure you have the tools so you can be productive, right? So there's a lot of different tools, whether you're using exploratory tools that can minimize your time, if you're using test and defect management tool sets. But I would also encourage you, when you look at tool sets, try to also see what your development team uses, right? So when you get into automation and things like that, you want to make sure you have similar licenses, so your company's not spending with 2 different vendors all the time. You should be able to put code in so that you can see code coverage and things like that. So those are the other things. When you look at testing tools, it's not only about you, but it's also what the remaining company is doing, right? What are the tool sets? How can you get continuous integration in place? Things like that. Same with what are the tools you're using for monitoring networking and performance testing, things like that. A lot of tools, I keep repeating it over and over. You might not use all of them, but you need to be in a community where people can talk about it, get excited about it, and you never know when you will use it, right? And at that time, you don't have to sit and try to find out what the tool set is. So there's plenty of tools out there in the market that can help you. Use them. But at the same time, a word of caution that I've seen a lot of people do, the tool is for you, you're not for the tool. A lot of companies, they buy tools, and now you're forced to go through this laborious process of doing things a zillion ways, right? Please remember the tool is for you. It's so that your work is easier and you can use your super intelligent human brain for other things and not to be a slave to the tool, right? Any questions? Anybody that knows an exciting tool set that I could learn something new today? Oh, wow. I can put an audience to sleep, can't I? That's not going on YouTube, is it? That. The last but not the least, right? Connect the dots. And everybody that's from a testing background will agree with this one, right? It's very important when you do estimations and other things, you should be able to connect the dots in the end. I know so many places that estimate for sprints and they forget, you know, and I mean they forget. I'm not saying the tester has forgotten about it. They keep thinking about it every day. But when the program manager puts it all in, they forget that there's something called regression. They forget that all these beautiful dots that work actually have to be strung together and they have to work together, right? So I will always say, as a testing group and as a program management, project management group, please remember there's always connecting of dots. Your dot is beautiful and you're proud of it and you released it into market and you showed that you're doing continuous delivery. Great, I love you. But please don't forget that they all have to work together. And it's cool to get code every now and then. But you want to make sure that your dots join all the time. Again, keep a focus. Testers tend to get forced to think only about a sprint. They don't have time to do anything else. They're thinking about that sprint. Nobody likes them saying, hey, this doesn't work. Hey, that's sprint 10. You're in sprint 2. Don't think about it, right? You'll get there, right? But do think about it, right? Because in the end, you want to make sure that this project fits with a bigger program. You might be connecting with various APIs, and there might be various departments, and you might have to escalate and make sure their testers know that something is coming, and you're going to someday integrate with them, right? So always keep thinking, are you making impact at a project level or a program level? Also, if you learn something didn't work for your group, please make sure to escalate it at a program level. It doesn't make you look bad. It really doesn't. Any other tester will appreciate it if you can tell them that, hey, this didn't work for us. I don't know if you should go down this route, right? Help the others. And that's why I say break down organization silos. There's so many testing groups, but a lot of us just don't talk to each other, so we're just too busy, right? We're just so busy, if you don't know what the other group is testing, you never know. You could reuse a lot of their work. Because the systems do integrate pipely, right? So a lot of the times your managers could find out if they have modular test, that's something you can pick. If you know they have some automation, and you can rely on their automation and then build something else for yourself. So break down those silos. Again, integration, people use it in different ways. I know certain companies look at integration as SIT. So that is, after everything works, then integration. Other companies look at integration as, okay, this sprint works, who does it integrate with? So different ways of using integration tests, right? But make sure that your estimates cover all of that.